And people often look at locums, they're like, oh, well, you're making so much more money. And there are lots and lots and lots and lots of things that you need to consider other than the money that comes to your check.
Welcome to the Awakened Anesthetist podcast. I'm your host, Mary Roberts. I'm a certified anesthesiologist assistant living and working outside of Kansas City, Missouri. I created this podcast to give CAAs across the nation a place to come together and awaken to our profession's unique ability to create a life by design rather than default. That process can start by simply listening and engaging with this podcast. By doing so, you're already changing what's possible for CAAs, for you, for me, for all of us. I'm so thankful you're here. Let's jump into this episode and see what we can do together. Hello and welcome to our process series. Good morning if you're listening to this on the morning it releases. I have already had the conversation that you're about to hear, and I just wanted to share how impactful I think this process episode is going to be for our CAA community. I know it's going to be really expansive and eye-opening to any CAAs who are wanting to use the locums industry as a means to create their life by design. And if you are a CAA or CAA student and you don't exactly know what working locums means or if it's for you, this episode is going to be especially expansive to you because I am about to share a behind-the-scenes conversation with a CAA who is currently working locums, and her partner, her husband, happens to run a locums staffing agency. So they very candidly break down from both sides, boots on the ground, and then also from the business side. They break down the money, the lifestyle, the hours, and just generally what working locums truly looks and feels like as a CAA. One thing that we discuss that you may have encountered if you are a current CAA and have been trying to break into the locums market like I have is that a lot of staffing agencies don't work with CAAs yet, and that made me feel a whole bunch of things, but John really discusses why that's the case and how CAAs can work with and around that reality. So I had just so many of my own questions answered throughout this conversation, and I hope it encourages you to take that next step into using your CAA profession to craft your own dream life, whatever that looks like for you. As always, before we get too far into this episode, let's meet Jenny and John Nolan a little bit more formally in a quick timeout. Jenny graduated with her Master's of Science in Anesthesia from UMKC here in Kansas City in 2018. She then worked a full-time, no-call position for 4 years in Missouri before making her transition into a 4-day-a-week full-time locums career. During her 4 years working as a CAA in a traditional hospital setting, her husband, John, started his own healthcare staffing agency. His agency, Next Move Inc., currently places medical professionals into more than 20,000 open staff positions in their system. Although John's agency, Next Move, does not currently contract with CAAs, he and Jenny are working together to create some innovative future opportunities for CAAs in the locums market. So welcome, Jenny and John, to The Awakened Anesthetist.
Thanks, Mary Jean, thank you so much. What a treat.
I know. I'm excited for this conversation. I wanted to start us off by first meeting you, Jenny, since you are the CAA, and John, you are the husband of a CAA, but I have so many questions for you, John. But for now, I think I want to meet Jenny and just hear about her experience into the CAA profession. So, Jenny, would you first tell us just about your cultural background and your upbringing?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Northwest Missouri, Maryville. It's a small college town. And so my dad was a college professor. My mom worked at the university as well. So while it was a smaller town and a rural setting, had a lot of the opportunities that a college town brings. And because my folks were in higher education, there was never really question in my mind of if I would go to college, but more where I was going to go to college and what I was going to do with that degree.
Very good. And tell us, please, about how you first heard about the CAA profession.
So my uncle was actually a CAA. He was actually a few years behind Dan, is my understanding,
Really?
at Case Western.
And Dan is my dad.
Yes. Oh, sorry for context. So my uncle was one of the very early CAAs.
Oh.
He graduated from Case Western, I want to say late 70s, somewhere around there. And my entire life, he was like, oh, you should go into anesthesia. Anesthesia, you would be great. It's a great lifestyle. It's a great career. You'd be great. And of course, I said, no way am I going to do that. That sounds terrible. And then I was a chemistry major. I started out as a chemistry major in undergrad and really was not loving that life. And so shadowed him over the summer and really liked it. But to be quite honest, up until that point, I hadn't really explored any careers in healthcare. And after that initial exposure, I was like, hey, actually, I've never really considered medical school, but now I think I want to go the med school route. And so I kind of pursued that for a little bit of time. And somewhere along the way, I met John, my husband, and we had a really frank conversation about what we wanted our life to look like. And at that point, we knew that because of his career goals, we needed something that would provide financial stability. And I don't know, John, you can hop in here anytime you want, but we knew we needed a career that was going to be fulfilling and not the amount of time investment that medical school would be, not the amount of financial investment that medical school would be. And because I knew about CAAs, I was like, okay, maybe I'll just look into this a little bit more, pursue it. I did some more shadowing, particularly in anesthesia, and here we are.
Yeah, I remember that conversation as, hey, babe, I'm going to need to be able to not take a paycheck for 3 years while we get a business up off the ground. And so if you could maybe get out of school quicker with less debt, that'd be great.
Well, thanks for sharing that so vulnerably and open, because I do think in real life, there are decisions like that made. And because the CAA profession seems to capture a lot of people who were thinking about medical school or diverted from medical school or maybe are waitlisted or something like that, I think it just helps to be really honest about why that decision was made. And I think it is helpful for our listeners to hear that as well. So I appreciate you guys being so open about it. Jenny, walk us through a little bit about you working, the traditional full-time career as an anesthesiologist assistant and then making the move to full-time locums.
So my first job out of school was at a level 1 trauma center. One of the things that was really appealing to me about that job, one, they had just a really phenomenal group of people and a ton of fabulous anesthetists and CAAs that just are incredible people and turned out to be some of my best friends in the whole wide world. And that particular job did not require overnight call, which I had identified during my life as a student that I hated trying to sleep at the hospital. And they also didn't require you to take call from home. And one of the things that John had identified in his list of priorities in life is he wanted to live in, quote, the woods. And so being able to live in a place where we were outside of town and we didn't have to kind of be within a 30-minute driving distance of the hospital, that was really appealing to us. And so I worked there for 4 years. I will tell anybody who will listen, it was a really awesome first job, in part because we did just about everything there. It was not a teaching facility. It was a big hospital. I would say on a very average day, there would be 100 anesthesia cases.
Wow.
So a ton of work, lots of production pressure in that you really develop and hone your skills, but also a pretty diverse patient population. We were the only level 1 trauma center in the area. So I was on the heart team. So we did open hearts and structural stuff with hearts. We had an outpatient surgery center. And so we did end up doing a lot of pediatric cases. They were mostly healthy peds, but the only thing we didn't do a whole lot was OB. Our docs kind of covered OB. But as a first job, it was a great mix of everything, really developing and honing skills that I had learned in school, but learning to use them in practice is a little bit of there's a learning curve with it. And it was a really great first job to be able to continue to learn. I tell everybody, you'll learn more in the first 2 years of practice than you will in the 2 years you were in school, 2.5 years you were in school. So it was a really, really awesome place to start. But during all of that, John started his business, and it really started taking off. And so he was commuting up to Kansas City. Most weeks he would go up Tuesday, come home either Thursday or Friday. And we joked kind of at the beginning, like, oh, a commuter marriage. It's so great. Like it's really the key to a happy marriage, maybe, because the time that we do spend together is really special and prioritized. But honestly, it was tough. It was tough. And throw in global pandemic and just a lot of stress and changes in healthcare in general. Through all of that, it became apparent that we needed to kind of prioritize some of the other aspects of our life, including our marriage and our family. And it just made a lot of sense to be in the same place.
Yeah. I actually really loved it because I got to spend Friday through Monday in the woods and like at home with my wife. And I spent 3 days hot and heavy in Kansas City, meetings back to back. And I think, really what pushed us to make the move was Jenny had been kind of exploring the Locums deal, got some opportunities that she was interested in. And it just kind of hit me that even though it really worked out well for me and I loved it and I didn't really need to move up here. Jenny was the time that I was chilling on Friday through Monday. Jenny was also chilling, but she hadn't had that really 3 days jam-packed of excitement. And so she was just in the woods all the time, or at the hospital, dark when she goes in, dark when she comes home. And it was just really, just kind of made me see that, we had an opportunity to take the next step of our relationship.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit more about Jenny, you finding that first job and how that all went. But I want to first dive into John a little bit. And I selfishly would love to hear just how you met Jenny. We just heard that you went to college together, but tell us how you met.
Yeah, this is a really great story.
Good.
So we went to college together and had overlap. I'm 2 years older than Jenny, and we were both athletes. I played football and she ran track. And she says, yeah,
I literally ran circles around him for like 2 years.
Yeah, and somehow I had no idea who Jenny was. Years later, when I'm introducing her to my friends, they're like, "You're Jenny's wife," her maiden name, and so they knew who she was, but somehow I didn't. So in college, I started a landscaping company my sophomore year, and we had to stay in this little podunk town in Northeast Missouri for 2 days over the summer, and I wanted to do something, and so decided to start a business, and ended up our landscape company sponsored a table at the Heart Health Gala, Northeast Missouri Heart Health Gala, and Jenny was emceeing the event.
Oh,
Jenny, for all of the listeners, is the ultimate badass. She's a 6-time All-American triple jumper. She's was Miss Northeast Counties, I think, or she was Miss something many, many times, and runner-up Miss Missouri. And so she was emceeing this event. And first time I ever saw her in person, she comes up on stage, and I told some folks at the table with me that I was going to marry her. And then like an hour later, she does her rounds and is thanking everybody for sponsoring the event. And it was my chance. And I was just like, "You're welcome. Thanks. Bye." And just like let her go. And I got so much shit from everybody at the table just that I had struck out. And so the peer pressure was real. And I went over there and next to her and her date and invited them over to my house for an after party. And then I had to go back to our table and say, "Hey guys, we're having an after party, so call everybody that you know." And she showed up, and the rest is history. After 6 months of convincing her, then she needed to date me. The rest is history.
She showed up to your after party with a date, did I hear?
Oh, yeah. Yep. I like a challenge.
And get this. His name is also John, was John. It was a very confusing time in my life, but it all worked out.
Yes, it sounds like it. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so John, you have been a lifelong entrepreneur and you started that landscaping business, which it sounds like probably honed your love for entrepreneurship and being your own boss. And then while Jenny was working that 4-year stint and you were in Kansas City commuting, you had started a healthcare agency. Can you talk to us about the start of Next Move?
Yeah. So I had a buddy that was a travel nurse and he wanted to start a travel nursing agency and was having trouble getting it off the ground. And I was the resident entrepreneur of the group of guys. And so he approached me and said that he'd give me some equity in the business, a minority equity stake, if I could help him break into some clients and get the business up and running. And so I did, and just was kind of really part-time in that business for a while as it was going. I was running the back office, the finance, invoicing, payroll, those types of things. And after about 1.5 years of that, just observing a little bit from a distance of that business, and in that time, getting to talk to a lot of clinicians, I realized how much more I liked working with clinicians than with landscapers, and getting to solve problems for them and learn their stories and make friends. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And I also saw that it was a lucrative business. Like, it was a business that you could scale without a lot of capital intensive investment, and that, was a growing market. Healthcare is pretty recession proof for the most part. So as I learned more about the business, I got excited. I went full time into that business in, I think, late 2017. And then for the entire year of 2018, I just really dug in, took over the operations of the business. We scaled it significantly and just learned more and more about it and had some ideas about how we could make it even better, and approached my partner to buy a bigger equity stake in the business. We couldn't come to terms on that. And so I ultimately gave him back his equity and didn't have a non-compete. So gave him back his equity and left to go start Next Move. So we started in spring of 2019, and I partnered up with another clinician, a neurotrauma ICU nurse from the Kansas City area who had some other entrepreneurial experience. He's our chief clinical officer. And we just built an agency that was very clinician focused and that also utilized authenticity and this kind of like no bullshit approach, which was something that was, just not a lot of our competition wasn't doing that. They weren't using social media effectively. They weren't building this really authentic collaborative relationship with the healthcare providers. And so we said, we could do that. Like, that sounds fun. And, so that was it. And that was a year almost to the day before the pandemic hit, the US. And so we talk a lot about how we've had a really good return on luck.
Yes, you certainly have. Yes, that was good timing to start a healthcare staffing business right before the pandemic. I wanted to back up just a little bit because I am realizing that I bet our listeners could use some definitions on locums work versus PRN work versus maybe some other terms, John, that you hear used in the industry. I think CAAs tend to say that I'm working locums, and Jenny, that's certainly what you would say. So maybe you both or John could take the lead on just describing some of those terms for our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. So healthcare staffing is the industry. And that is any type of supplemental staffing, meaning staffing requirements beyond what the hospital would employ as direct employment, or W-2 employment for the hospital. So, it's really, that whole industry started in the early 2000s as a thing to kind of supplement folks who were taking maternity leave. And it has just grown a lot from there. But within healthcare staffing, there's locum staffing, which is or locum work, and that's generally it's mid-level providers and physicians. And the designation there mainly is that when you get to this kind of higher acuity, the thought is that those individuals are able to take more tax advantages. And so the 1099 work makes more sense. And we can get in more to that later, but they're kind of separately designated, even though, CAAs are allied healthcare providers. Their income and kind of acuity or intellect, I guess, is such that they would take advantage of the tax incentives of working directly, build a business themselves off it. So there's also travel nursing, travel allied, and those are generally, that term is used for contracts that are usually 3 months long. Again, this was all kind of built off of that maternity leave. Okay. And so that's just what stuck.
Oh, okay.
3-month long contracts that you'll work. And that would mean that you're working for an agency, not for the hospital. And there's PRN staffing, which for allied and for nursing is shift by shift generally. Sometimes you'll lump in, a couple of shifts together, but it's it's generally used when somebody is supplementing a full-time job or when they are just making up shifts through lots of different places for whatever reason, not kind of long-term guaranteed assignment work.
In my experience, PRN work is typically direct through the facility, whereas like the travel nursing is with an agency, and locums are either through an agency or they're like a 1099 direct contract with a facility. The PRN work is typically hospital employee or facility employee. So again, kind of differences with W-2 versus 1099.
Jenny, I would love to hear just your experience, the boots on the ground of getting that first locums placement. And then John, I would love to hear maybe how we all could learn from Jenny and maybe do it better or do it differently, and just have a discussion about how, Jenny, you found those first few places to work.
So in my experience, I was looking for a very specific geographic region. Looking at the full-time opportunities that were available in that geographic region, I knew that I was going to be taking a significant pay cut, which I'm like, I'm happy to make less money if I have a more predictable schedule and my schedule is better and I don't have to take call. But for me to move from a full-time gig to another full-time gig, make significantly less money and have to take call, I'm not interested in that. And so we had talked for a while about making the move to Kansas City. And so I reached out to facilities in Kansas City. It was a good year before we actually ended up making the move to say, hi, this is me. Here's my experience. Here's what I'm looking for. Can we, how could I help fill a need for you that also align with my priorities?
And you were okay with full-time, however full-time looked for you, or potentially being hired as a locums. You didn't say in that letter to them what you exactly wanted.
Yeah, I was like, I'm open to seeing what you guys, like what opportunities exist. And at the time, nobody really bit. They were like, well, we'd love to have you full-time to take call and do all of the things. And I was like, well, at that price point, I just can't make it work. Sorry. We'll be in touch. And so you know what, I'll give a lot of credit to the people in Kansas City because they were wonderful to work with. And we would just kind of check in with each other every quarter or so, every 3 months, and just see like, hey, have things changed for you? No. Okay, great. Thanks. We'll touch base again.
Meaning the other hospital staff or anesthesiologists that you were communicating with.
Yeah.
They checked in with you and you checked in with them.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Wow.
And so finally, in the beginning of this year, 2022, the ball started kind of getting rolling with one of the facilities was like, you know what, let's go ahead and just get you credentialed to work PRN so that if and when you are in town on your vacation and you want to pick up shifts, we at least have you kind of in our docket of people we can call. In that conversation, that facility said, you know what, to be quite honest with you, we only envision using you a couple times a month, if that. And that was a little concerning to me because I'm like, I'm not sure if financially as a family, we are ready to go from 2 full-time salaries to working a couple shifts a month. So I reached out to another facility and they said, of course, we would love to have you full-time. However, if you want to work PRN, we would love to hire you PRN, and you can work. Right now, we are staffed such that you can work as little or as much as you want, as long as you meet the kind of requirements for their PRN. And that's the other thing about PRN work. A lot of times facilities will have a minimum number of shifts that you are required to at least give them availability for. At neither place that I work do I get a guarantee that, like, I can give them dates that I'm available to work, but they do not have to guarantee me that I will work.
Would you say that's another distinction of PRN versus locums, or PRN is as needed, therefore they can call you off, and a locums placement is more of a contractual placement where you have guaranteed shifts? Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Basically, it was like, oh, well, this sounds like it could be a really good, seemed like a good compromise for being able to work as much or as little as I wanted, having the flexibility.
One thing I'll add, like, as I'm listening to Jenny kind of recount this, timing is everything. Relationships are everything. The hospitals managing staffing is one of the hardest things for hospitals. And that's because people are hard to manage and they change, and it's not supply chain issues, and supply chain people try and manage staffing requirements. So it changes all the time, and it's seasonal, census based. It's based on opportunities that they have for joint ventures and partnerships and expanding service lines. And that's at the whim of the board of directors and the economic environment. So the sentiment wherein somehow in spring of 2021, lots of hospitals said, we have no idea what's going to happen with surgery volume this summer. Last summer, it was off a cliff and we don't know. And so, no, we're not interested in bringing on locums or having PRN. And then in 2022, it's like they'll, fight tooth and nail to get somebody who can just, cover a shift a month. So having that like connection that Jenny made where it's, here's what I'm interested in, and you're just building relationships and staying in touch. I think that's really valuable so that when the conversations come up, you're top of mind. Yeah.
Yes. I was going to say, if I'm hearing you, Jenny, and I'm taking notes on how to potentially get my dream locums placement, let's say, you're building connections, you're maintaining those connections, you are being, it sounds like, pretty blunt about what you want. And if those aren't met, if they can't meet you where you are, then you say, thank you so much, but maybe we'll come to an agreement later. And then you follow up with that. John, is there anything else at that point that you would give a CAA recommendation to do? Should we be doing this with 10 area hospitals? What if they all come back and say, oh my goodness, now we really want you? Like, talk us through what else we could be doing at that stage.
So wouldn't that be great? 10 hospitals say, yeah, we want you. And then, I would say that more options is better, and that Jenny kind of held this hard line, which I think that if she hadn't held this line we'll talk about, she'd be in a different position. And that was that, the place that she gets most of her hours from, that she really likes working, really was hesitant on doing a deal on PRN. And she knew that they were in need. She knew people that worked there, and had this feeling that if she held out, that she'd be able to get this job that she wanted. And so I encouraged her. We said, no, we're going to just stay firm. And they ultimately did come around and say, okay, well, we'll give in and we'll do this. So I think a lot of that, like getting that dream job, came into being really communicating clearly what you wanted and reinforcing that. And that's a little bit of salesmanship to it. I think that making sure that what's important to you is a very big factor. And, in in the travel nursing and allied business that we're in,
Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest thing is open communication about
Yes.
what matters and what doesn't, and being honest with that, and not trying to, I don't want to like game the system. So just
Mm-hmm.
knowing what you want so that you know what yes looks like, and communicating that and holding that line, I think is really important.
So good. So good. So for you guys, or Jenny, maybe you can, say that I have this right. Your biggest priority was flexibility, and you wanted to control the days you wanted to work. Is that correct?
Yep.
John, give us some other examples that you commonly hear of other priorities. People come to your agency and say, this is my top priority, and you like to hear that clear communication. What are those people saying to you?
Yeah. So geography, shift, and pay. Those are the three things that everyone says that are like, you can have two normally, but the stars have to align to have all three of those. So if it's a really high paying job, there's a lot of competition. Shift is a big thing in nursing. It's a little bit less so in the locums work, but geography is generally like the most important thing to people. They've got an idea of where they want to be, and there's just not a lot of folks who are open to, I'll go to Florida, or I'll go to California, or maybe Kansas City. It's they've got an idea, and that is one of the toughest things, and that's where your building relationships makes all the difference.
Yeah, I'm just like synthesizing all of this from my experience as a CAA and trying to think about questions that people have. And I'm kind of thinking, Jenny, you did an awesome job with this. It sounds like you used all your connections. Maybe everyone has some connections. That is probably true. But if you feel like, I just don't really know anybody in this new city, I don't know who to contact, tell us about how we can go to like the common sites like Bag Mask and Gasworks and figure out, hey, I want to move to Texas in this area. How do I start identifying how to, make connections?
I think start in your academic circle or people that you've worked with. So I tell students, like, anesthesia is a pretty small world. Be careful, like, what you say about people, because a lot of people know just about everybody or they know a lot of people at least. And so I think I have some friends that when they decided to look for a new job, they reached out to preceptors that they had that they know now live or work in a specific geographic region to hear about their experience. Because even if that person doesn't work at the hospital that they are thinking about applying to, they know people that do, or they have coworkers that used to work there, or they have classmates that work there or used to work there. And so the circles are pretty small. And a lot of times they can connect like through that little chain of events, because they're all usually reliable professionals. You can get in contact with the right person so that you can have those really honest conversations with the people who actually make the decisions, not some HR person who's going to,
not know what a CAA is.
Right. Exactly.
I think another sneaky trick is if you don't know anybody in the market and you want to figure out how do I get a job as like a PRN gig in, I don't know, in Florida, and I don't know anybody down there, go do interviews for the full-time openings. And so, you'll probably need to do it a little ahead of time. It may take a year, but you'll meet the docs, you'll meet the hiring managers, you'll understand what their culture is like, you'll know how to speak to it and sell to it, and position yourself as somebody that they want to offer a full-time position to, and then say, well, because of this and this and this, it's not the right time for me, but can we stay in touch? And stay in touch and share, research and publications on LinkedIn so that those individuals see it, and occasionally just check in and say, hey, any chance that you're looking for you've got a per diem opening, or you're looking for, contractors, or, even who are the agencies that you work with, or who are the recruiters or executive recruiters over there. So getting in the door that way so that you know who the folks are, and you they can put a face to the name. So much of like getting the best position, the like creating this magical, perfect thing is all about you building relationship capital and selling yourself. If they want you, they'll make it. Like they'll figure out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got to, from a scale standpoint, managing staff, they have to have processes, and people then have to fit into boxes that are well defined. Those suck. And so to create the opportunities outside, you have to get them to say, I really want this person.
Okay. That is such great advice, because I think, and Jenny, I think maybe you mentioned that the locums market is really hot right now, and it's really shifting towards the advantage of the clinicians, towards the CAA. And it feels like, maybe we should have all these opportunities being thrown at us. But if you want a very specific opportunity, you are still going to have to put the work in. It sounds like regardless of how the market is. Is that, John, what you would say your experience is? And Jenny, you as a CAA?
Yes, I would say that is true to my experience, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The hard thing about CAAs is just that you can't just plug them in everywhere, because it's a different operating model. And also hospitals are just in general risk adverse. Like they are just big risk adverse organizations. And so unless they've got an established model for it, there's got to be some focus before they'll agree to take a chance or to do something different. And I think that's why it's tough that your pool of openings is just, it's so much smaller, and it'll change, but to get what you want, you got to put the work in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great advice. I have more questions about CAAs and our smaller pool of options, but I'm going to save that towards the end. I want to talk a little bit about money. Jenny, when you were talking about having a job that, was sounds like higher compensation job, and you were wanting to go to a bigger city where, generally speaking, you do make a little bit less because they know people want to work there, and so they can give you a little bit less money to work there. I would say that's overall fairly true. It was a pretty deep pay cut. And so you were then looking to do locums work or PRN work because theoretically you would be making more money. So I just wanted to be a little bit more specific about that, as specific really as you could be. I don't know that I need exact numbers. I would love exact numbers, but just to hear how the money pans out in terms of, a traditional W-2 job full-time versus locums PRN.
Yeah. So coming from the job that I had, I made a lot of money there, but I also worked a lot, right? And so kind of like I said before, I was really very comfortable taking a pay cut and knowing that I was going to take a pay cut as long as I had a better schedule. And people often look at locums, they're like, oh, well, you're making so much more money. And there are lots and lots and lots and lots of things that you need to consider other than the money that comes to your check, or like the check that comes, or whatever gets deposited into your bank account every 2 weeks. So big things that need some considering. One, being a 1099 worker versus a W-2, you have to plan your taxes. You have to worry about your taxes. You have to submit money every quarter. It's not getting taken out automatically. You have to calculate that for yourself. You have to plan for it. And because we make a lot of money, it's a lot of money that you have to pay in. And so you have to invest in a good creative accountant and be really cognizant of that. Another thing that people, I think, gloss over are all of the benefits that a lot of full-time jobs have that they take for granted. Health insurance. I'm very lucky to have a partner in which I can get great insurance through his company. And so that's not a concern, but that's a concern for a lot of single people or people who were in the position of being the person who provided the health insurance for their family. Life insurance, disability insurance. I think people don't talk nearly enough about disability insurance in a job in which we absolutely need our hands and our eyes and our backs and our feet to do our job. Retirement, that is a huge thing, like moving from a place that had very generous profit sharing to having to really think and plan out about how I'm going to do my own retirement savings has been, a challenge and something to think about, plan for, consider. One of the things that has been really great. So I'm like an official 1099 locums at one job, and at another job I'm a PRN, but I'm W-2, and that job does offer basically a 401k with a 4% match. And so I'm like, okay, heck yeah, I'm going to, utilize that as much as I can. But I'm also not working full time. So yes, I am making more dollars per hour than the other people that are at the hospital. However, am I actually taking home more dollars? Am I getting more value out of the hours that I am working based on the other things that I am paying for out of pocket? That's going to be different for every single person.
I can say, because I do know the numbers, I crunched the math even for you, Jenny. I know.
Let's hear it, John.
So it's probably about like after-tax income is probably, without really creative tax strategies for 1099 locums, it's probably something like 35% better pay.
Okay.
So pretty significant, the downside to that obviously is it's not guaranteed, but if you were working full time, after tax, it's probably about 35%. And it's even better if you were to be like what the IRS considers a transient worker, a traveler, so that you can have stipends. You can take some of your income as tax-free stipends. So you could move it up to like maybe 50% better, 150% of what you'd be making as staff.
I've never heard that term, transient worker. Could that be applied to a CAA? But they'd have to be traveling 3 months this place, 3 months that place. Like it couldn't be a stagnant setup.
So the way the IRS loosely defines it, but probably for good reason. But the general rule of thumb is if your tax home, the home that you have that you put on your tax return, is more than 50 miles from where you're working, then you are. It's an economic kind of development incentive that the IRS does, and that your employer or contractor can pay up to a certain amount per day and per diem for travel, per diem for lodging, and meals and incidentals. So the rate that they can pay tax-free and it's meant to be a reimbursement, but it doesn't, it's not like you have to submit a receipt for it. You're going to have expenses for lodging and travel and meals and incidentals. And so the government says, we will let you compensate them for this, and they don't have to pay tax on it. And you, the employer, do not have to pay matching taxes on it.
Okay.
So it's kind of double. You get to not pay taxes, income taxes, and your employer doesn't have to pay the 12-ish% in maxing employer taxes. So they can pay you more of it. And it's meant to say, hey, like, go do interstate commerce and be a little bit of an incentive to be able to do that, to get people to work outside of their home, to be able to have work and lower the unemployment rate. Not really a thing that the U.S. is having trouble with right now, but so that has not really made it into locums very much, but it will, I think, more in the future. The locums profession is growing, like just generally physician and mid-level. But yeah, I think that, like, going back to how Jenny was like categorizing the pay, the real benefit, and one of the things that I've heard from a lot of mid-level and locum travelers, is that the benefit is in your flexibility of the schedule flexibility, and less so in the income. But and Jenny also was at a high paying place compared to peers. I mean, your
perspective was a little bit high to begin with.
And she's still, making take home 35% more. With creative tax strategies, you probably could be up to 42% more.
And just to be clear, the 35% more, is that after, Jenny, you've paid for your disability, you've paid for your, alternative retirement, or out of that 35% more pay, you then have to pay the things that your previous employer was paying for?
I would say that it's that factors in health insurance. It probably doesn't factor in disability. Disability's tough because and life, it's all about how much you want.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. But still theoretically more. Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that, because I do think there's this mystique about working locums and you're getting $175 or $200 an hour. And, that sounds like so much more than I'm getting if I break down my full-time salary. But you need to keep in mind all the things that a full-time employer is giving to you, not necessarily for free, but they're paying a portion of it. And if I weren't working full-time for a W-2 employer, I'd be having to pay all of it on my own. Wonderful. I think I've got it. Hopefully everyone else does as well. John, there's actually a question that I have come across in my own search for locums opportunities that when I faced it, I was like, oh, that must just be because we've got such a smaller piece of the marketplace. Like there's, 60,000 CRNAs and there's only 3,200 AAs. And so that's why this is happening. But when I was speaking to locums agencies, a lot of them, didn't place CAAs at all. So they knew about us, but didn't place us, or they didn't know about CAAs, or they had a few opportunities, but they weren't super great at getting back to me. Like I just felt like I was missing a piece. Like I couldn't quite understand why I wasn't being sought after. And I was just hoping that you could clarify what's going on that end and, just help guide us do that part of the process better, or go in armed with more information so we know how to circumvent whatever that problem is.
Yeah. The issue is that the way staffing works in America right now, healthcare staffing works in America, is that the hospitals say that they need a job, and then the agencies go work to fill the job. And it's not that the agencies are marketing clinicians as much. And so, and because there's such high volume of open healthcare needs, this works. So, like our agency has 20,000 openings that we're working right now. Right. And we've got, 70 internal staff members.
Wow.
So there's this unlimited amount of openings. And so when they say that this is a pain in the butt for them, it's because they have so much other stuff that they can work on, and that like soliciting you and finding you the right spot, they don't have to do that. They can field inbound leads for jobs that are there that have been posted by groups or facilities. So
now, can I clarify just for a moment that 20,000 job postings, is that for nurses? Are you talking about? Is that CRNAs? Who are those 20,000 job opportunities for?
Those are our jobs that we've contracted with, like availability for hospitals. Those are allied and nursing travel needs. The total openings in healthcare right now is a little over 200,000. So there's 200,000 open contract jobs for locum and all the way down to kind of entry level allied, tech positions within healthcare. Yeah. Gotcha. 200,000 openings right now.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense. So basically, an agency is obviously looking to make money as easy and fast as possible. And if they were to take on a CAA, we are harder to place than these kind of low-hanging fruit job placements for all the other healthcare specialties. Wonderful. Thank you for clarifying that. Now tell me what I need to do to make myself look so good that they want to do the work.
You should give them a list of the hospitals in the area that you're interested in working at and say, do you have contracts at these hospitals? Do you have points of contact there that you can ask the account managers, the client managers within those agencies to say, hey, have you guys considered taking CAAs as contracts or in PRN? Do you guys have a need? Who would you talk to? So those agencies have deep relationships within healthcare systems. And so if you know which hospitals or groups or whatever use CAAs, and you can then have the agency who has that connection just ask, you'll probably be able to get an answer that way. That's
great.
probably the way to go about it. It's just also challenging if it's a group versus if it's at the hospital, because these physician groups rarely are contracted with agencies for supplemental staffing. I don't really know why it's that, but especially groups that are formed for a specific hospital. Anesthesia group gets this hospital's contract for 7 years. I think it's that the amount of needs that they have is just not enough that agencies are really interested in soliciting their business. And these old docs are just like, they don't even know. They don't go look to solve it, because what they've done forever is Indeed and just word of mouth, the people who are running those companies. And hospitals have just overall big needs, tons of needs. So they have to go find solutions, and they get creative, and then they come across agencies, and then the agencies figure out how to solve the problems. If a hospital came to us and said, we need to be able to have honestly, if a hospital came to us and said, we need one locum CAA on staff all year, every year, and like we need to, when somebody leaves, we need to backfill that, we would contract with them and we would do that. And I think a lot of agencies probably would too, because we're experts at finding people. The deal is the work of building a pipeline so that we can fill that worth it in terms of the revenue we will generate, or the net income we'll generate. And staffing a CAA on a 3-month assignment at a hospital is not enough. Like what the agency makes is not enough to justify building the pipeline or getting the contracts in place and stuff like that. You'd need more sustained income for the upfront investment.
Okay. And this is putting a lot of pieces together, but now I'm trying to find our way through as a CAA profession. Like, how do we know what we're up against? And for the person who wants to have a more flexible career, how do they circumvent these barriers? If I'm at home and I'm thinking, how do I traverse these barriers? How do I get myself into the locums market? Is it smart for me to even approach a locums agency? Like, do I even need to speak to XYZ agency, or should I just go about this on a one-on-one, find that contact at the hospital that I'm thinking about, or in this region, find multiple contacts and just do it myself? Like, can you give us some advice on when to know to go through an agency, or, how to find these opportunities on our own?
Yeah, I can say that in general, self-representation is not generally a good thing to do when you're contracting, but in the case of CAAs, it probably is. In almost all cases, it is. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk to an agency. You should, and I can give you a kind of a recommendation of who I would talk to if I was an AA and wanted to do this. So, agencies are experts at understanding the market. They're experts at knowing how to get you a job. I mean, they're resume experts. They understand who else is applying, how many people there are, what are the things that are going to make the client say yes. And oftentimes what we find is that, in that initial email that you're emailing, let's say it's the hiring manager, it's the doc that runs the practice or whatever, you could say something, one line in there that just takes them totally off. Like, you're out of consideration because it's something that is it's a trigger for them. And, it could be that it's a Catholic health system. It could be that it's a no nicotine facility, whatever it is, that, they're experts at that. They have the relationships. They know how to grease the wheels. They also know which ones are experiencing, partnerships, and that they're going to be having needs in the near future. So talking to agencies that do that work, or even just agencies that staff hospitals in that market, is good, because you'll get more information. Information is really important into negotiating great deals. So, I think that if you had a hospital that wanted to, employ you, using an agency as a broker, if they use agencies, not all of them do, but using an agency as your broker could be beneficial. But, again, it's not every agency is the same, and you want to make sure that you're getting a fair rate. And
the other thing to add to all of this is that, going back to kind of the money conversation, is the agency is going to be a better negotiator. And sometimes the agency is going to be able to provide some of those benefits that you're going to be lacking otherwise. So like the nurses who work for John, they can get health insurance right out the gate. They can opt into some retirement savings type plans. And so
yeah, we match 4% of your taxable income for your 401k. We pay 65% of your health insurance premium.
Yes.
We have long-term disability, critical accident, dental, vision, all that stuff. Everything that we offer for our internal employees, we offer all of that to our clinical staff. The thing to remember, though, is you don't qualify for that if you're 1099. You have to be a W-2 employee. But you can do that. You can be a W-2 employee, for an agency. And I envision a future in which that's going to be the case for CAAs, is that you guys you'll have that opportunity, and it'll be a lot more like travel nursing. And I don't know why it's so much different than, I think that there's a little bit of there's a cultural thing with CRNAs that I'm not sure it'll happen with CRNAs like that. I think that there's a different cultural thing about how they think about the work that they do or the jobs that they take that I don't think is there with CAAs. I think CAAs are going to be able to have this more travel nursing style of gig economy that I'm really interested in, and Jenny and I have talked a lot about what that looks like in the future.
I mean, I think that there's something to that, because a lot of CRNAs, and a lot of times they're taking these 1099 positions, at least from the little research I have done, a lot of times they're independent practice type places. I mean, a lot of times they're coming into a hospital that has a care team model, but a lot of times it's independent practice. And so they really love this idea of being their own boss financially, and then also their own boss in the operating room. We always work in conjunction with a physician anesthesiologist. And because of that, because we know that, I think that, there is definitely like a cultural shift around, like, we know we're going to be working in an anesthesia care team. And so the culture around that, I think, is going to be different.
Yes. It's not so much the culture of wanting to do locums because I want to be an independent practitioner, but I want to do locums as a CAA for flexibility, or maybe these other targeted things. Like, I want to work in these few areas. I want to do these types of cases only. We have maybe a different reason to go into locums.
Exactly.
And I also wanted to just clarify that, John, you were saying that the future you see would be more of a travel nursing gig economy for the CAA. And you were kind of referencing that we could be a W-2 employee of a locum staffing agency, receive 401k and all that stuff, because we were a W-2 employee of that staffing agency. And there would probably be very little or less 1099 work you're kind of seeing in the future. It would be more of that W-2 employment through the staffing agency.
Yes. Because you have to work with a physician, you are not considered a revenue line for the hospital. Even though there's like a charge on the bills, like for anesthesia, the CAAs are not considered a revenue line. And that's very similar to nurses. It's considered like it's an overhead cost. Mm-hmm. And because the way that the hospitals think about this and the way that like purchasing is done, it's a little bit more interchangeable, and that sets it up for the gig economy to where you can plug and play a little bit more. It's not that it's any different skill set. It's just the way that the hospital thinks about it from a revenue standpoint and what they're open to doing.
This is answering so many questions. And I think as a CAA, I think we can be a little overwhelmed. Like, why is it so different for us versus a CRNA? Like, why are there more challenges? And it's very interesting. I have a very optimistic view of the CAA profession, but I'm hearing like, this sounds great. I would love to be a member of the gig economy. And I don't care if I'm a W-2 worker and get all these benefits. On one hand, I'm frustrated that it hasn't happened yet for us. It sounds like it's in our future, and that we need to be looking in tandem with locums agencies to find jobs and also be doing our own boots on the ground, person to person contact. And, make sure the agencies know that we're there and we're relevant. But at the end of the day, if they can't do it for us, we can do it for ourselves until there's enough of us creating enough demand that the hospitals go to the agencies or the anesthesia groups go to the agencies and say, hey, we need CAAs.
Yeah, the future. So healthcare is so broken that it will have to change. It's going to take a while because it's such a big problem to solve, but there will be changes. There's a lot of tech that's like coming into this space that's changing how workforces are being managed, and marketplaces for jobs are adapting quickly, and that'll eventually go into a much, much better GasWorks. That website is kind of atrocious, actually. I was on there this morning and it's rough.
Everyone should look at Bag Mask as well, because GasWorks, I feel like, is kind of like down and out. And I mean, obviously everyone still does utilize that, but Bag Mask is also in that space, and they are doing really good work for CAAs, CRNAs, and physician anesthesiologists. They're making it a platform for all of us. So, feels like we are really nicely positioned to, as we kind of burst into more of explosive growth now, we're kind of also coming at the same time where there's going to be some more diverse healthcare coverage, and we can kind of slide in there and fill those gaps because we don't have a history of like, it's always been done this way, so we have to do it this way, and we can kind of roll with the punches a little bit easier.
This CAA profession is like ripe for a co-op right now. So that's another thing, how you control, like how you get control is there's not a ton of CAAs out there, but the facilities that use them, I mean, from the docs that I've talked to, from how I hear Jenny talk about it, the research I've done, like docs would prefer in most cases to use CAAs. And I think it's a little bit of like a cultural thing. They like working with them better than CRNAs. And I think too, it's just that kind of the interchangeability, and there's probably a lot of culture, and it's a little bit less expensive, although I'm not sure that that's going to be like that for long. Because there's just no reason why, if you can do this, if you have the same information and do the same things, like that's what's broken in healthcare right now, is that there's this like they're keeping people out of being able to help people. Anyway, so a co-op where you could say, we're all going to get together. All of the CAAs that are within this zip code are getting together. We work for our co-op. Like it's almost kind of like a union a little bit. And so then that group like is contracting with the physician groups, instead of it being like, why do the anesthesiologists have the power in this thing? Like, just because they go and can sell to the hospital, like, okay, maybe. Well, they still have to have you guys. They can't do it themselves. So if all of you guys got together to where they could not staff their surgeries without, like with the people who weren't in the co-op, they had to go to the co-op, then you guys would you'd have complete control again then. And you'd be able to say, here's how we're working. We're going to we will manage our own schedules like within this. But again, it's like, I'll follow the money. The hospitals are the ones that make the money. They're the ones that pay for everything. So they're the ones that are dictating how it is. And they will do that as long as they can get away with it. When they can't get away with it, they'll find that they will be open to change.
Well, you just gave someone a good idea out there.
You have to beat us to it.
Okay. We unfortunately are closing in on our final question. And one of the main missions of this podcast is to show the listener how the CAA profession can be used to create a life by design, and rather than just doing what's always been done. And Jenny, I would love to hear what's next for you as a CAA, maybe how that statement resonates with you, or, anything it brings up that you'd like to share.
So I'll start with where we started. My uncle, who was a CAA, he's retired now. He had the most awesome life. He has the most awesome life. He took multi-years off of practice. He did 2 stints in the Peace Corps. Wow. He took some time off to literally just ride his bicycle across the United States, like from California to Georgia. Cool. He now lives usually half of the year internationally somewhere, Thailand, Colombia, and he retired in his early 50s, something like that. And so and part of the reason that he was like, oh, you should you should do a career in anesthesia is because you can have a life by design. Basically, I think Mary, he didn't use those exact words, but you.
I should have him on.
You
you should.
I really should.
Nailed it in terms of that is one of the things that this career can offer you. One of the other things that part of the reason I really wanted a more flexible schedule is because for some reason, we all bought into this lie as a millennial that our career is going to be the thing that is our, the sum of our value. Our purpose is going to come from our career. At least that was what my impression was. And as high achieving individuals, to work so hard and then get into a career in which there is no upward trajectory. There's no momentum. You're starting out super high and you have lots of skills and you're getting paid lots of money and you have a great lifestyle, but you're the way that I sometimes just describe it is you're a highly paid bus driver. You show up, you get people to where they need to go. There's no long-term goal. You don't get any delayed gratification. You don't get to see your patients days, weeks, months, years later. We don't get to feel good about helping people because we see them in their most vulnerable time. We see them when they're scared, in pain, nauseous, high. We don't get any delayed gratification from it. And so because of that, I started looking for other things in my life that I could find a sense of purpose in. And so because of that, I have all of these other wild and crazy, wonderful interests. I do photography on the side. Fun fact, am applying to law school. I don't know if I took the LSAT.
Oh my gosh, congrats.
Has already gotten in several places and has gotten scholarships to several places.
Naturally, it sounds like John's I'm not surprised.
But I think for a long time, I thought that my career as a CAA is going to be the pinnacle of my life. When in fact, now it is the catalyst to the life that I actually want to live. And I will tell anybody who listens, I am so happy. I am so freaking happy. Because, I was in this really pretty awful negative feedback loop where I didn't feel like I was in control of my life at work. It was emotionally exhausting, physically exhausting. I was working a lot of hours. I'd get home. I would be too tired to cook a good meal or exercise or invest in all of the things that gave me energy and purpose. And then it was okay. And then I get up the next day and I start it all over again and it's terrible. And now, because I've been able to kind of reverse that, I'm in a positive feedback loop. I have the time and energy to invest in myself and exercise and cook good food and have hobbies and read books and find joy. And so, I literally feel like I am living a life by design. And do I have a lot of pieces that I'm still trying to figure out? Yes. But I think this career can be a catalyst for living the life you want to live if you are willing to identify what you want and take the risks and be able to have a hard line of, nope, this is my priority. And maybe the timing's right, not right at this moment in order for me to be able to have that right now. And so I'm going to work on building the relationships and waiting for the right opportunity to present itself so that you can then live the life you want to live.
Totally. Yes to everything. While you were speaking, I was remembering that I heard someone say about a different profession, but I think it's true that the CAA profession is a tool to live your best life. It is not the life, but it becomes the tool to live your best life. And I heard that all over what you were saying. And congrats on getting into law school. I mean, go you. My goodness. I'll have to have another conversation with you about that whole journey. John, same question to you, but I'm curious, what have you identified or have you ever thought about what Jenny's CAA profession allowed you to do as an entrepreneur? Like, what was that dynamic, being partnership with someone who's a CAA?
Well, I can say that first, like, I owe the success of the business to Jenny deciding, just like being more committed to my happiness and our marriage than her ambitions in life. And like, we would not have this business if she was not making enough money to support both of us as we launched it. We literally wouldn't have it. Everybody thinks COVID was just really good for the healthcare staffing business. And actually in the Midwest, it was really terrible for the first 9 months.
Really?
Hospitals
Well,
lost.
I was one of the people who thought it was so good.
Yeah. Hospitals lost a ton of money. Elective surgeries were out the window and nobody was going to the hospital and everybody's masked up. And
yeah.
So it was just like, to be able to not have to worry about getting a paycheck until like we got the business going was amazing. And honestly, has blown my mind several times, like how much income she was able to make, like as the breadwinner in the family, the sole income provider for a long time. And that allowed us to like live a life where we were still living an amazing life, like that was everything that we wanted, while also I was able to go build a business, and that has like now like that was able to then change us to take the next step in our life. The other thing is I have learned so much and gotten so much more passionate than I even was before about healthcare. The amount that I've just connected to the mental health burnout pandemic or crisis that is in healthcare, I wouldn't have without Jenny being in this profession. And it's been able to really help me understand what the providers that we're staffing are going through and relate to what's true for her. Like, it doesn't have to be true for me for it to be true. Like the healthcare providers, are just shit on. It's so terrible. Yeah. And it's, and understanding, like, from her first hand perspective of working with physicians and patients and other mid-level and nursing and techs, like in the hospital, I've just got a much more broad understanding of what the problems are in healthcare, which is going to help me solve some of those problems. So it's been life-changing, and we've had a lot of fun. And I tell everybody that I know, like, my next business, I want it to be with Jenny, because she's a badass. And she's just, she's been able to do a lot and learn a lot. And the CAA profession has literally changed our life. And I think it's going to change a lot of other people's lives just because of what it's done for us, and what we're going to be able to do because of that.
Wow. You guys, I'm so happy we got to have this conversation, because I think you answered a lot of sort of shameful questions. Like, maybe CAAs are scared to ask, like, why not me? Why don't I see myself represented in these job opportunities? And also given some great roadmaps on how to find your own opportunities and how to expand into markets and like start agencies seeing us and start advocating for yourself as a CAA, and then let your value be known to the agency. So I really appreciate both perspectives and you guys being so generous with all your comments. I have a strong suspicion that lots of people are going to have questions for you. Is it okay if I put your contact information, your emails in the show notes? John, mostly CAAs are going to be listening to this. And at this moment, Next Move does not staff CAAs, correct?
At this moment, Next Move is looking into that. And I would imagine in the near future, we will. We're actually, we're very, very close, probably 3 weeks away from closing a little acquisition of a surgical staffing business that staffs first assists, surgical first assists. And I think that's going to kind of be our gateway into getting into the anesthetist range. So what I would recommend is like reaching out to Jenny and making connection with her, because anything that I do in that space will be with Jenny too. Awesome. And connect that way. And then that's a good way to connect with me.
Wonderful. And you had said earlier that you did have a locums agency that you would recommend. Would you mind sharing what that is?
Yes. So Jackson Healthcare, they're based out of Florida, but Jackson Healthcare is a very reputable physician search agency that does mid-levels. And I know the folks that run that company. They're a big company. They're national, great culture. And Jackson Physician Search is like the division within Jackson Healthcare that I would recommend. And they do staff CAAs. So check with them first would be my recommendation.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for being so generous with that. I know that's not your company, and I appreciate you being open to that while you find a way to staff CAAs in the near future. So thank you guys so much. Jenny, I think I'm going to start doing some locums at one of the places that Jenny works. So we'll see more of each other.
Let's do it.
Yep. Yeah. John, it was nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you too, Mary.
Yeah. I hope you guys have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this process episode. Thank you so much to Jenny and John for sharing so openly and being so vulnerable and letting us really see behind the scenes of what it is to be a locum CAA and to run a locum staffing agency. I know how expansive this episode was for me, and I know our community is going to benefit so greatly from it. So if you enjoyed this episode, I would love to hear how it landed for you. You can do that by emailing me at awakenedanesthetist@gmail.com, or you can rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. If you have further questions for Jenny and John, I will leave Jenny's email in the show notes, and I will leave a link for John's company. Both can be contacted, but John said that anything he does in terms of CAAs will be with Jenny, so you can email her and stay in the know, and also filter any questions you have about the particulars of being a CAA locums to Jenny. Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Yay! That was fun.